We should all know by now that when large numbers of globalist elites get together to play tabletop war games, we lowly cattle are in for some troubled times. In October of last year, Event 201, a particularly prescient pandemic exercise, just so happened to play out what would take place during a worldwide response to a novel coronavirus. The exercise players were 130 prominent individuals from organizations and institutions like Johns Hopkins, the World Economic Forum, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, lobbyists from Big Pharma, and experts in various fields. The event was the fourth in a series of such exercises which date back to Operation Dark Winter, an equally prescient bioterrorism attack simulation that took place only 3 months before 9/11 and the subsequent suspicious release of anthrax. As I have said several times now in recent videos, what the elites refer to blithely as exercises are actually not mere exercises at all. They are telling us exactly what will happen and the measures they will take in lockstep to make sure that we are kept in line and do what we are told. Ever since the middle of summer, we have been inundated by the propaganda machine's fixation on the hypothesis that Trump will steal the election. It has been accepted as fact by many that November's elections will be bitterly contested and that the Trump administration will go to any length to stay in office, regardless of the voting results. When these stories first started to appear in nearly every media outlet imaginable, it seemed at first glance just another example of the paranoia and the proclivity toward projection which characterize the collective psyche of the radical left. But upon closer inspection, it seems that what we have here is yet another elitist coterie of con men playing games with our lives, wargaming scenarios that could or may take place in the upcoming election. Turns out that all this time, all those articles we've been bombarded by since June were not simply the ramblings of individual paranoid commie kooks on social media and at legacy media outlets, but rather a highly coordinated top-down effort by globalist oligarchs set on subverting law and order in the country and plunging us further into one world government and the technocratic slave state. On August 3rd, 2020, a document entitled "Preventing a Disrupted Presidential Election in Transition" was presented by the Transition Integrity Project, a quote-unquote bipartisan group comprised of over 100 current and former senior government and campaign leaders, academics, journalists, and as always, a lurid, shadowy sundry of shills and so-called experts. In taking a closer look at who all these ostensibly bipartisan players are, it becomes more and more apparent that this is not a cadre of well-intentioned bipartisans at all, but a stacked deck of never-Trumpers, neocon rhinos, and elite leftists occupying choke point positions in nearly every applicable field, the majority of whom have ties to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Soros's Open Society, and other globalist NGOs, leftist think tanks like MoveOn.org, United to Protect Democracy, and the New America Foundation. In fact, one of the two founders of the project, Rosa Brooks, wrote an article in January of 2017 entitled "3 Ways to Get Rid of President Trump Before 2020. It was reported early in September that Brooks not only has ties to George Soros and the Open Society Foundation, but with former Biden National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, as well as with Clinton campaign chairman and alleged Pizzagate pedophile John Podesta, who himself played the part of Joe Biden in the war game exercise. The other founder of Transition Integrity Project is Niles Gilman, a transhumanist who works for the Berggruen Institute, whose goal is to promote America's transition from capitalism, and has funneled tens of millions of dollars into CCP-run universities and maintains close ties with Chi-Com regime officials. Gilman wrote this essay on what he calls mutualism, a quasi-communist theory that, quote, ensures the fair distribution and deployment of wealth via direct public ownership of wealth-generating assets. The 22-page document produced by the Transition Integrity Project is a textbook study in subversive leftist psychology, and echoes of Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals reverberate throughout. The first time we heard the term, the new normal, it was following the Agenda 21 United Nations war game held in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. And from the beginning of the document, we are told to get used to yet more newness of normalcy. I quote, "The concept of election night is no longer accurate, and indeed is dangerous. We anticipate lawsuits, divergent media narratives, attempts to stop the counting of ballots, and protests. The administrative transition process itself may be highly disrupted. Participants in our exercises of all backgrounds and ideologies believed that Trump would prioritize personal gain and self-protection over ensuring an orderly administrative handoff to his successor." Listed first and foremost under the heading Key Insights from Scenario Exercises is this, quote, "There is every reason to be concerned that our electoral rules and norms are under threat," unquote. Meanwhile, without a hint of irony, the authors unabashedly state the preceding page that, quote, "TIP recognizes and shares the view that the Electoral College is profoundly anti-democratic and functions to create structural biases in our voting system," unquote. Whom exactly is it then that is threatening our electoral rules and norms? Beginning on page 15, TIP authors outline descriptions of the 4 separate games and what they believe to be the likely results. The first game ends in ambiguity with a 269 to 269 Electoral College tie, but would eventually result in a Biden win due to what is explained as a blue shift. In the scenario, not only do they posit a strange specific theory that a rogue individual might destroy a large number of ballots believed to have supported Biden, but that Trump would coerce individual swing state electors, invoke the Insurrection Act, and federalize the National Guard to stop further vote counting. In Game 2, the authors predict a clear Biden victory in both the Electoral College and the popular vote. In this scenario, the Trump campaign alleges massive fraud, calls for joint DNI, DOJ investigations, scrambles to maximize federal funding for Trump businesses, as well as to prepare pardons for all individuals connected to his administration. He announces plans for the quote-unquote new MAGA TV station featuring documentary footage from Trump's final weeks in office. Meanwhile, in this scenario, the ever-benevolent Biden campaign takes steps to, quote, heal the country, and at the same time also begins the process of preparing for investigation into Trump, his family, and his associates for reasons that are not explained in the document. The Biden team magnanimously emphasizes creating a credible transition process, which of course the Trump campaign seeks to hinder by various means of subterfuge. Game 3 is the only scenario in which this ostensibly bipartisan committee can even imagine a Trump victory, though it is only by winning the Electoral College as the popular vote favors Biden 52 to 47%. This game ends in massive cultural upheaval, in quote, constitutional crisis with threats of secession and the potential for either a decline into authoritarianism or a radically revamped set of democratic rules that ensure the popular will prevails by the abolishment of the Electoral College, making D.C. and Puerto Rico states and other changes, unquote. According to the model, this result is characterized by political chaos, widespread threats of violence, and sporadic actual violence in the streets and a hostile, dangerous, highly partisan, and frequently unconstrained media environment. The insanity of the left and their fever dream color revolution is most notably captured in the prediction that in this scenario, the Biden campaign encourages California, Oregon, and Washington to secede from the Union unless congressional Republicans agreed to a set of reforms to fix our democratic system to ensure majority rule. Obama will advise Biden to submit a proposal to give statehood to D.C. and Puerto Rico and to divide California into 5 states or more. In a stunning act of hubris, the Biden team provokes a breakdown in Congress by getting the House of Representatives to agree to award the presidency to Biden, but laments that the GOP would likely refuse this by crazily insisting that Trump was reelected under the Constitution because of the Electoral College victory. Mind you, this is the only scenario in which the models predicted a Trump victory, and it ends without a commander-in-chief by noon on January 20. This is a textbook clear-cut coup, and by the way, what does it mean when a group that assembled on the premise that Trump would steal the election is telling us that they themselves are planning on stealing the election? Accuse others of that which you yourself are doing is quite the appropriate quote here. Game 4 presents the circumstances of yet another Biden win, this time a narrow win in both the Electoral College and the popular vote. Again, the paranoia of the authors continue on display when the scenario posits that the Trump campaign will engage in a large, coordinated disinformation campaign alleging a stolen election and voter fraud and a noisy DOJ investigation into voter fraud. The Trump campaign and the fantasies of these people will release false information that Joe Biden had a heart attack in an attempt to create doubt regarding Biden's fitness to hold office. Although the Biden team dispels this information, Facebook fails to censor posts about the heart attack. In what is only one of the most insane assertions in this document, the Trump campaign, quote, stokes chaos and mayhem by urging local police forces to break up BLM and pro-Biden demonstrations and encouraging, quote-unquote, alt-right/boogaloo supporters to confront liberal protesters, unquote. They actually use the complete contrived boogaloo boogeyman meme without a hint of irony, as if they really expect Hawaiian shirt-clad Nazi KKK white supremacists to stoke street violence. Of course, Trump refuses to leave the White House, begins to burn documents and incriminating evidence, executes a series of pardons for himself and his advisors before being escorted out of the White House by the Secret Service. Trump transitions into running MAGA TV to call for Biden to be impeached. Again, to stop here and point out the insanity of such an assertion that Trump will become, for all intents, a YouTuber with a channel devoted to impeaching Biden is pure projection at its most pathetic. Even though Biden wins yet again in this scenario, his campaign organizes massive protests around the country, and violent skirmishes and vandalism take place. Another abjectly insane assertion here, quote, "Sensing the election slipping away, right-wing media pursue aggressive strategies." And here's their example of right-wing media assertions at this point. Quote, "InfoWars doxes electors pledged to vote for Biden and announced spurious claims linking 88 of these electors to Soros and 14 to child sex trafficking." That's right, 88 and 14. 14 and 88. They actually wrote this down on paper and published it. It continues, quote, "Rush Limbaugh and others accuse the Biden campaign of accepting help from China and predict that right-wing quote-unquote meme pages echo this sentiment and appeal to the right to gasp, defend the Constitution from enemies both foreign and domestic." By the end of this scenario, it is again the Biden campaign that so graciously begins the selfless task of uniting the country and trying to pull America out of lingering COVID-19 related economic and public health crises. Equally magnanimous is the Biden campaign's original plans to facilitate a way out for Trump to concede. But this thoughtful consideration soon dissipates, and by the end of the game, the Democratic Party begins investigations into criminal activities of Trump and his family. Really, I don't have much to add here, and this was kind of a different video than what I normally do, but I just wanted to give you all a heads up of what exactly is in the Transition Integrity Project and the insanity it reveals about the left. You can read the document for yourself. There's also an Appendix C that I have running through now, included in the document, entitled "Will Trumpism Survive a Trump Loss?", which has just more schizo ramblings that I didn't have time to go into here. I've said many times before that I do not exist in a two-party paradigm, and I do not play red team versus blue team games. Politics in the upcoming election is just window dressing here. This is all just kabuki theater to hide us from what is really going on here, and that is totalitarian control of every single aspect of our lives. I'll have more videos out soon, more interviews. Share and sub if you haven't already, and may God bless you all. Look forward to reading your comments, and I'll link the document in the description. Everybody enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye.